to create this thriving practice. In other industries like STEM, for example, outsourcing things can be a lot simpler because there's a lot clearer of a guideline that you can give to other people to execute tasks that you're doing. But when you're doing it for creative work, it's kind of hard to communicate some of those things that don't seem as tangible, that are just your style and your taste and that secret sauce. That's kind of what makes you different. But that being said, creative people are still humans. You only have so much time. And a lot of times I think taking on too much stuff by yourself and not thinking about what you can outsource can really limit you in your scope of your creative career. It makes it not quite as scalable as it can be if you don't look for other things that you can delegate to other people. So if you're considering outsourcing, or maybe if you haven't considered it, but this is going to make you start thinking about this question of whether you should or you shouldn't, I'm going to go over some of the things you have to think through to make sure you're making the right decisions and outsourcing in the right way. So there are risks to outsourcing things in your creative career. The biggest one being losing your voice. Like I said, that kind of special flair that you put on your creative work is what makes you successful and is what's giving you your own unique edge. So outsourcing can risk you losing that voice a little bit if you don't do it the right way. That being said, there are so many other benefits too. First and foremost, you're going to have more time to work on other things and to invest in the projects that you are super passionate about and that will actually move the needle on your career. You can increase your quality too if you make the right decisions with how you outsource. You can bring in other people's expertise in places that you don't necessarily have that expertise, or just increasing the quality because you don't feel so burnt out. When we're burnt out, we're not able to bring our full self to the creative process. Less stress too, obviously, less burnout. All of this kind of mixes in together. And then the biggest thing, though, is that you're just going to have a more scalable practice. You're laying down a foundation to be able to create a career in a company that can scale indefinitely versus tying everything to you as an individual. So if you're deciding whether it's time or not to outsource, I have 3 things that I think are important to consider that can give you at least a starting answer of what to start thinking about. So the first thing to consider is, are you making money right now? If you're just starting out in your career or your creative practice and you're not making any money, it might not be the best time to invest in outsourcing, at least on a consistent basis. So you might probably not want to hire a virtual assistant or a blog writer or a social media manager, any of these people that you're going to be employing on a monthly or even quarterly basis. Any kind of regularity in money that you're going to be spending, since people are usually the most expensive asset that you're going to have on a team or in a business, it's probably not going to be the right decision for you if you're not making money from it currently, or if you're just making a little bit of money here and there. But that being said, they always say that you have to have money to make money. So a lot of times you have to invest money into your business in order to make that first dollar. So something like a graphic designer to design your logo, or a website designer to give you a really great website, these kind of more one-time things might be a good place to start if you feel like you do have a really big need for those and you're not able to DIY it. Okay, question 2 is the amount of tasks that you have to do getting in the way of you achieving the growth that you want to see. An easy way to see this is if you're getting bogged down by so much work that you're having to turn down things you actually really want to do. So it's not that you have all of this really, really great work that you're in your total flow mode the whole time. You don't have time to take on other projects. I'm talking about these little annoying things that are getting in your way, that are making you say no to things that are actually more important to you, whether in terms of what's going to fulfill you creatively or what's going to move you forward as a business. This isn't going to be as black and white of an answer, because there are some things that are going to be a lot harder to outsource. So this is kind of more of the starting answer. But I think a good place to start here is thinking if there are some things that you can outsource that aren't going to need your special touch on them. And we'll talk in a little bit about what some of these tasks could look like that are a good starting place for this. Question 3 to ask is if your expertise in anything is holding you back. So I am a huge DIYer that throughout my whole career, if I've ever needed to learn something like building a website or learning SEO, that's actually how I got into SEO, which I specialize in now, is I just needed to do it. So I learned how to do it myself. And and I needed a logo, so I made a logo by myself too. So there is a time and place for DIY, but there's also a time and place to know that some things should be left to the experts. One, for the sake of time, that if you are busy building a business, you might not have time to invest in learning all of these things in a way that you did before when you weren't scaling quite as big. But also, people are experts for a reason. You can't expect to, even if you put hours and hours of learning a skill, dedicating it to that skill, there are people who have years and years and years of experience. So if that is a critical thing that you need and you have the money where you can invest into it and it's going to make sense money wise and time wise and everything, sometimes I think that's a really great place to outsource. It's just knowing where you are not strong and finding someone else who can fill in those strengths. So that's kind of a general rundown. One, are you making money? Does it make sense financially to outsource it? Two, are all of these tasks bogging you down and preventing you from growing? And three, are there any things that you are just not good at? So now we're going to talk about some of the different categories of things that you can outsource. This first category, I think, is a really great place to start out with if you're just kind of dipping your toe in the outsourcing pond right now and seeing what little things you can get off your plate. This is a great opportunity to push some things off your plate without sacrificing any of the creative lifeblood of your practice. So this is admin stuff, things like scheduling if you need someone to manage your calendar or scheduling out social media posts or something like this, just like little things that are kind of monotonous. Like these are the kind of things that like I would do while I'm watching a reality TV show or something like that, or just kind of like mindlessly doing. These are good things to push onto other people's plates. Email management too, even if you are writing your own emails, having someone just send these out, scheduling them, formatting them and everything. Accounting is another thing. Not hiring a full-on accountant, but just making sure that someone is organizing any of your receipts, staying on top of your income, paying quarterly taxes, things like that. And then the next category is more specialized skills. And when I say specialized, I mean things that you don't specialize in. So things like graphic design, website design, video or photo editing, some of these more creative things that, I mean, if you are a video editor or a web designer or a graphic designer, this might be some stuff that's a little bit trickier to outsource since that is something you actually do. But for other people who are not in these design professions, this is something that can just kind of help elevate your brand a little bit, but isn't to the core value proposition of your creative practice. And then there's technical tasks too. So things like doing SEO audits, some random web development things, not necessarily design focused, but if you need someone to help boost the functionality on your website for something or fix these errors, just kind of some of these more foundational technical things. So I think those are all really great places to outsource where you're not necessarily sacrificing any of your own creative control. So later I will talk about outsourcing things that are more connected to your core value proposition, but we're just going to start by talking about some of these tasks that are more disconnected from those core activities. So of these outsourced tasks, one thing that you really want to do as you're in the process of making these decisions of hiring other people on your team is you want to calculate the ROI of it. And this doesn't have to be an exact calculation, but you just want to think critically about how much outsourcing these things would actually bring value to you in your creative practice and being just extremely honest with yourself in this moment. So a good way to think about this is to think of how much money your time is worth. So this is a lot easier if you are a freelancer who has an hourly rate. This will be a pretty simple calculation that as long as you have a steady stream of leads coming in, you could fill in this time. This is as easy as outsourcing these tasks will save me 5 hours, and those 5 hours I know that I can fill at $50 an hour. Then you have that ROI of outsourcing it. Just subtract whatever you're going to be paying the other person. And likely their rate is going to be less than your rate. So whatever that difference is the amount of money that you're making. You will want to figure in any additional time that you'll have to spend in bringing on this person. So that means interviewing them, doing some onboarding stuff, anything else that can add on to the amount that you're going to be paying them, at least initially. But if you are going to be working with them in the long term, then this is going to be less relevant. So let me give some examples of when the ROI isn't necessarily going to lead to the answer that you should outsource. So let's say that you're a writer and you have 200 followers on Instagram. Are you going to actually get what you need and get ROI out of hiring a social media manager? Think about realistically, when you hire someone, are the boost in your book sales, which are probably your number one KPI for how much money you're making, unless you're some kind of like a book influencer or something. In that case, I guess it would be a different scenario. But in this scenario, let's say the book sales are what is your main revenue generator. Is hiring a social media manager to manage this little social media account at this point, is that worth it? And will it outweigh you just taking an extra hour per week to try to grow the social media presence a little bit by yourself first? And obviously, this is not a super reliable or consistent calculation. You don't know definitively how much social media is going to impact your sales. And you also don't know the exact results that you're going to get from the person who you hire to run your social media. You could get way more results than you expected, or you can get way less. So I think it's just balancing what the most likely outcome is for this and weighing that up to either you not doing it or just trying to fit it in yourself. Another example, if you are just starting out, you're launching a brand new website and you have zero traffic right now, is it going to make sense to hire a web designer to do a total custom design for you? Probably not. This can cost thousands or tens of thousands of dollars to hire a really good web designer. And I don't think that many people can justify this if they are just starting out and just building traffic. Unless, again, maybe you are an influencer who has tons of followers that you know will go over to this website. But the majority of people, it's going to take a lot longer for their website to build up the organic and direct traffic to make this investment in web design worth it. So at that point, I would recommend just doing a template-based web designer like Squarespace or Wix, or even just getting a premium template on something like WordPress so that you do have that flexibility that if you want to redesign it in the future, you can, but you're starting out with something smaller right now. Even if you get a really nice template that's like $500 or something, that's still going to be a pretty good compromise where you're not outsourcing it, but you still know that you have something that's going to be really great when people come onto your website. So those were examples of when it's not worth it. So when is it worth it to outsource? So the biggest thing here is considering your top performing areas, what is getting you the most results, and then consider the pain points in those areas. So let's say that you have a really active community that receives a newsletter every single week, but you're not great at proofreading. That is me. I will proofread my client work really, really well. But when it comes to the stuff that I actually put out, proofreading is a really, really hard thing for me to dedicate time towards. So you may either not do this or you are spending way too much time doing it yourself. If this newsletter is a big ticket item for you, you might want to invest in a proofreader. Or let's say that you have a really great portfolio of work. You know that there are tons of clients that you could get, but you just don't have enough time to actively apply for new gigs, reach out to potential clients, everything like that. So it might make sense in this scenario to hire an agent that can help you find these new gigs. And the great thing here too is that a lot of the agents will take a cut of what they make you out of the deals that they arrange rather than a flat fee. So this makes it a lot more likely that you will get a positive ROI out of this, because if they only deliver a little bit, you're only paying a little bit. If they deliver a lot, you pay them a lot, but it's easier for that to be offset by the results you're getting. Another example, you get a ton of website traffic, but your website looks like shit. In this scenario versus the scenario of the website with zero traffic, this is where you may want to invest in a more robust website design. Or let's say that another writing example, because I'm a writer, but I might spend a lot of time doing a lot of research for a client's blog, or you're helping someone else run a podcast, or you run your own podcast and you're making money from this actively, but you're spending so much time researching that by the time that you get to writing, you're kind of burnt out. This is a great place to outsource. Have someone else do this ground level research for you. Not even ground level, the deep research for you, so that once you get it, you can dig into it, pull out your own storylines and everything, but you're not spending hours searching through sources and internet and everything to find the research for this piece of written content or for the podcast. The main key here, though, that I want to make super, super clear is that in order to make outsourcing worth it, you can't just sit back and relax during this time. This is not time that you get back just to live your life. I mean, unless it is. Unless you are like making enough money that you don't care about scaling to the next level. If this isn't a scaling issue, this is just simply a burnout issue, ignore this. But I think that scalability is the number one reason that a lot of people want to outsource. So in that case, you want to make sure that you're actively making use of all of this time that you're getting back from outsourcing. So for every hour that you know that you're going to outsource to other people, plan how you're going to use this time yourself to do this high value stuff that only you can do. Another thing that just came to mind now that I want to mention, I think it's really important, especially now in 2024. If you're considering outsourcing something to an actual like human being, consider what you can automate away. One of my things that I'm really interested in getting to know more in 2024 is Zapier. I also kind of started playing around a little bit with make.com, but basically these are just like automation software. So you can connect, I don't even know how many different tools can connect to this, but so many like Notion, HubSpot, Airtable, Gmail, the whole Google suite, YouTube probably, LinkedIn, all of this stuff connects to it. So think of the ways too that you can just automate things to add more efficiency. I think there are so many more opportunities now than there even were a year, 2 years ago to be able to just streamline some of this stuff. So some of the tasks before that were super tedious and really, really time consuming, first thing before even outsourcing to someone else is just to see what kind of built-in efficiency can you do in your own processes. Because this is just free efficiency. You're outsourcing it to technology. I mean, you might have to pay a small fee like for ChatGPT 4. It's like $20 a month, but $20 a month for technology is going to be a lot cheaper than outsourcing it to someone else, even someone with a very low rate, which I'd probably stay away from doing someone with a super low rate because you're probably going to get low rate work in return. Okay, so like I said, we're going to talk about how to outsource some of the creative tasks without losing your creative voice. And initially, I think all of this is going to depend on the types of tasks that you decide to outsource. The admin tasks that I mentioned earlier and some of the technical tasks, these you don't really have to worry about losing your creative voice at all. They can take care of just a lot of the little things that you don't want to worry about or that you're not super knowledgeable in, and just take those off of your plate and give you back more time to be creative. So your voice isn't so much of a consideration there. For some specialized tasks, a lot of them may not even be something you were doing before, or they might be doing something that you were doing before, but not super well. So I would definitely lean on the expertise of the people that you're hiring here. You're hiring these people hopefully for a reason because you really like their work and it aligns with your brand. So I think definitely don't try to micromanage these people and undercut their ability to do really, really great creative work. But make sure you give them clear guidelines for how to align with your brand so that they know kind of the personality of your brand, the color schemes, the kind of iconography you do, all of this visual and emotional. I don't know if that's the right word for it, but just the heart of your brand, what it's like. So I think giving them those guidelines, but then leaving them freedom to have a little bit of fun to help elevate your brand is the best way to go. So when you're outsourcing your actual creative work, you're falling into a more managerial role for the first time for a lot of people. And this can be a really tricky thing to delegate. So this could look like a photographer hiring a second shooter, a content strategist hiring a writer, a graphic designer hiring a junior designer, or a podcast audio engineer hiring a junior audio engineer. Essentially, you have to try to train them on what you're doing and on how you're doing it. And a lot of this can be super hard to explain because if it's just in your brain, you don't have to explain it. You just kind of feel how you do something. So this requires you to think really, really critically about what and how you do something in a way that someone else can follow. So the first thing you have to do here is have a very, very clear understanding of what your value is, of what your main value is. What is it that you do that makes you so unique, and how do you communicate that? This answer is going to be different for everyone. So unfortunately, I cannot answer this for you. But let's say if you are a video editor, what you really excel in is great shots and high quality. Another video editor, their value might be in storytelling. So it's more of the narrative around what they do and the strategy behind it versus the shots themselves. For a writer, your value could be really, really great research that you just pull out all of these incredible facts and that's what you're known for. For another writer, it could be super clear, concise writing that just flows. And there's obviously going to be, like, all writers and all video editors should have a little bit of all of this. It's not like it can be all aesthetics and no plot, or it can't be all words that sound good with no research, or vice versa. But there's definitely going to be some people who you shine especially well in one area. So think of where is that for you? And you might not even know it now until you think about it. Dig into your portfolio, ask your clients for testimonials, and see what makes you stand out from other people so that you can make sure that the people you hire can complement the skill set. So selection and training are absolutely everything for this. You cannot hire just anyone to do this. You have to make sure that you are hiring the right people who just kind of get it from the beginning to some extent, and then layer that on with really great training. So when you're looking for someone, I mean, everyone's going to have their own unique style and everything, and you don't need them to match you exactly, and probably shouldn't, because you should have something of your own too. But you're going to want to make sure that looking at their portfolio, looking at their website and everything, they can complement you already, so that you don't have to try to train them from the very, very beginning. There is some sort of a foundation there. So if people have a portfolio that is really strong, but you just can't tell from it whether it will exactly complement you, this might be a great place for a test assignment. I would never ask for free work from anyone. So I would do this with a select handful of candidates that you think are especially promising, and give them a paid assignment to see how well they can fit your brand identity and brand voice. Use this test assignment after you're super clear on what exactly you're looking for and you need in an outsourced employee. Bake that into that assignment to see how well they do. This assignment might not always be necessary if you can just kind of see at a base level that they have something that's going to complement your brand, or you can see that they're super adaptive, so they're going to be able to, adapt to anything that they give you. But I think that this test assignment can be a really great opportunity to kind of like see it in practice without fully committing to them, let's say for a retainer or something. And then once you select the right person or people, you're going to want to create really, really solid, in-depth brand guidelines. So this is going to be a lot more in-depth than the guidelines that you give to the specialized outsourcers that I was telling you about before, the ones that are doing things that are not core to your value proposition. This one is going to be super, super in-depth. So I think if this is something that you're outsourcing a critical part of your process, you're going to want to go through a typical process of creating something and make note of every single thing that you do, and try to use that to create a tutorial for how people can replicate this process. So something to note here is that this might end up costing you more initially than it will save you. Training people is really, really time consuming and expensive. And that's why they always say, I don't know what the actual rate is, but if you look up what it costs for a company to hire a new employee, it's like crazy expensive, because you have to do so much of this initial training. So if you're only hiring someone for one project or just for a month or two, this might not be worth it, because you have to be so intense with this type of training if it is stuff that's core to your value proposition. So creating this brand guidelines, that's just kind of the basis for the training. But from there, you're going to want to slowly introduce them to all the different types of things that they're going to be doing, and keep a really, really close eye on their work. actively give them feedback. If I had to give one piece of feedback to anyone who has ever trained me on anything, or any people that I've done a bad job at training, is don't just automatically revise what they're doing. Give people feedback and let them revise it themselves. If you don't give feedback and let them revise it themselves, they're never going to learn. They're never going to get the opportunity to figure it out. Because seeing something changed and like just looking at the before and after, they can kind of see like a takeaway from there, or what they have to do in the future. But actually going in there, seeing your feedback and seeing their thought process and how they apply that feedback, that is so much more valuable, not only for the person that you're hiring, they're able to work through that and like solidifying that skill, but also for you as the person training them, because it just gives you more insight into the way that they think. So outsourcing stuff like that, I'm not saying is not something you should do. This is something that is completely necessary sometimes. Anyone who has ever started an agency that has grown into something bigger has had to deal with this, but you have to do it the right way. Otherwise, you're going to lose the personality and the heart of the reason that everyone chose to hire you in the first place. So this is just something I think needs to be done with a lot of care. I also think an important thing to mention here too is to give the people who are creating stuff a stake in the outcome. Even though this is your business and your name might even be on it, the business could just be your name. But if you give someone a stake in there, and that could be as simple as giving them credit as a byline on something, or adding them as a team member on the about page on your website, or including them in emails when you're delivering something to a client, this recognition and this ownership, this partial ownership that you're giving people in the things that they create, is automatically going to make them feel more incentivized to put more heart into this. Because with creative work, there is no good creative work that doesn't have any heart in it. I am a firm believer in that. Not any kind of creative work that's going to make any difference or make anyone feel anything. So I think giving people the incentive and the opportunity to really put themselves into this and have something they can be proud of and have their name on in some way is going to make you a lot more successful in finding these people who are going to boost your creative practice to the next level. So some logistical things for any of these outsourced roles, whether it's an admin or a specialized role or one of these core creative roles, my suggestion broadly, but doesn't necessarily apply to every single person, I would always recommend starting off on a freelance basis. So having someone where you can bring them in when you need them, but they don't necessarily have any, you're not providing benefits or a minimum number of hours per week. I think this is a really good way to test out some of these people to see how they're going to fit into your process, and also see if the ROI is there, if it makes sense to you financially to continue to do this. Freelancing just gives you the best flexibility for this. You can also hire someone as an intern. I think this is a really great thing that I'm considering it maybe when I'm outsourcing more things on a consistent basis. I would love to hire an intern, always pay your interns. But just someone where I can help them kind of learn some things, and they can help me out with some of the things that I need. This is definitely going to be a little bit more time intensive than just hiring a freelancer or a part-time helper. But I think it's a great place to start if you just need a little bit of help here or there and want to help invest in the youth in your community. You can hire people part-time, and then full-time is obviously the most intense commitment that I think you have to have a really, really solid foundation in your business, not only for this to make sense financially for you, but also when people get a full-time job, that means they have to give up a lot of other things in their life. So you don't want to hire someone on a whim full-time and then realize a few months in that it's not actually feasible. So then you have to let them go. So I feel like full-time is something that you should definitely not take lightly, and only hire someone in that capacity if you're totally sure that that's the right move for you. But I'm always partial to freelancers because I just feel like that flexibility can't be beat. But again, basically everything else I've said here, a lot of this can vary from business to business, person to person. But yeah, these were just my general guidelines. This is something that I've been considering a lot lately as I continue to grow my own freelance business and as I'm considering scaling it too. So, yeah, that's how I would recommend going about outsourcing tasks if you are a creative. So, thank you so much for tuning in to the very first video episode of the Type A, Type B podcast. I can't wait to make some more episodes in the future. So, make sure you subscribe. If you're listening on one of the podcast platforms, subscribe wherever you're listening, and or head over to my YouTube and subscribe there. I'm creating some other fun little videos over there that are tech and productivity and creativity related too. So a little bit more shorter, casual videos. Going to be doing a lot of stuff about Notion, probably going to create some videos about Zapier and Make. Like I mentioned earlier, I'm going to be having some fun with those this year. So yeah, stay tuned for all good things, productivity, creativity, tech related. So thank you so much for tuning in, and I'll talk to you next time.